Hey, Brad Smith, we have coming up here Claire Elizabeth Coaching in a brilliant dating special. She mentions loads of themes, almost kind of too many to list here. Did you think she was a good guest?
She was an amazing guest. The sort of insight that she had into the whole thinking around dating, I found her really interesting, and it's definitely an episode that I'll listen to again. Actually,
Yeah, great talker. There was one of the parts where she mentioned about men classifying women almost instantaneously. So I think that's a really important issue for people to get their heads around. Well, but people that are dating to get their heads around. And it's called the Madonna whore complex. And it's where men see women either as being completely virginal and pure or just completely sexual and non wholesome, and that actually for men to be aware that we do that we're hardwired to do that, I think is useful for men that are dating to work out, oh, this is why I feel this way about this person. But for women to know that's what goes on as well is super important to work out, well, this is why men are doing this. Have you done that? Have you done that thing where you look at someone and make your mind up like in an instant?
yeah, I think so. Actually, probably not really thinking about it, but I think you do kind of go, oh yeah, that's somebody that I could pursue this with, or that's somebody that I would probably go down that road with. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Bradley,
Having
you
never heard of it before.
You dirty dog. I know what you mean about this road and that road. Anyway, uh, and also another little snippet that I heard, and I just thought it was really interesting to offer to our listeners, was that it's been said that women are the gatekeepers in dating. Women are the gatekeepers to physical intimacy. So no one's sleeping with anyone until the woman says yes, primarily because men are always like, yeah, yep. Like we'll put out even if there's not a woman there. Um, but it's not that the power is all just with the women, and that actually men are the gatekeepers to commitment and relationships. So for it to work, like the whole relationship to work, men need to show women that we are someone that they would want to sleep with or have a sexual relationship with. But likewise, on the reverse of that, women need to show men that they are someone that we would want to have a committed long term relationship with. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that. And a lot of women think, well, if I'm sexy, he'll want a committed long term relationship with me. And that isn't the case. And men sometimes thinking, well, if I show that I'm safe and secure, then she'll want to have sex with me. And that isn't the case either. So we kind of have to wear different hats and fit into different categories to try to find the right person, I guess.
Cool. So if you're dating in 6 months' time, it's Valentine's Day. So this is an episode you really need to check out.
Good shit. I mean, sorry, good stuff. Let's not swear already. Good stuff. Here comes the episode.
Claire, welcome to the show. We're very excited to have you on as our first girl. It's really quite a status thing going on there, and we're going to talk about dating. Obviously, the idea of this episode is our special episode, 6 months, exactly 6 months ahead of Valentine's Day. So we're going to have our kind of our usual theme, but just with that sort of dating twist, really. And we're going to start off in the same way we always do. So we always talk about takeaways on our show, with the idea basically that it's easy to talk about takeaways, but with a dating slant on that. My first question to you is, when in dating, do you think it's first acceptable to get a takeaway?
I'm so glad you've asked me that, because when you sent me over some pre-guideline questions and I was talking to a mate about it, and I said, the thing is, I wouldn't get a takeaway when I was dating unless it was an established relationship.
That was
Okay.
As in definitely exclusive, exclusively only dating each other. So I would say early stages of a cemented relationship. So you're just dating each other, you really like each other, you're hoping it goes longer term. In that stage, I think with dating, my mindset on this stuff has changed a lot over the years. I've learned a ton of lessons. And I think I've learned a lot of lessons from my female friends and things that they've done. And I think for me, I kind of keep it out of the home for quite a while.
Okay.
Because I think we need to keep that safe distance. I think it's easy to move into a relationship phase way before you're in a relationship. And that could do two things. It can get really boring really quick. It can create a false sense of intimacy that's not really there yet. And it can tempt you to sleep with someone when you maybe shouldn't be sleeping with them yet because you don't quite know them yet. And when you're at home, it's just easier, isn't it?
Sorry,
a glass of wine.
Just to interrupt, you're saying a really good takeaway gets sex. I didn't read this memo.
Well,
I should have known this earlier.
I think just being snuggled up on a sofa, having a glass of wine. I just think if you're in, a pub or you've gone for a nice walk, you can keep things more PG and base it more on a connection and whether there's real long-term potential than we can all get swept up in a moment and then be like, oh. And it's just a proven fact that if that happens too early, men lose interest.
This is fascinating.
So I wouldn't do a takeaway unless we were definitely exclusively dating. And we've had the chat that we really like each other.
I think that's a really good point, because I think you naturally think, oh, there's a pressure there. Whichever side you're on, actually, oh God, they're coming to my house, or them going, oh God, I'm going to a house. Is there an expectation? From a mental health point of view, I guess you can, you can go down a lot of emotions. You can go down excitement, but you could actually be like, oh God, like a little bit anxious about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
And it adds a pressure.
It adds an expectation. And I think so many people in the early stages of the dating are not very good at communicating how they feel. And so instead of saying, I'm very straight talking with dating, very straight talking. So I would say someone had to pop over, drop something off. I've had situations before where I was in the new stages of dating somebody and they had a football game nearby and they sort of pop in for a cup of tea, but my daughter was home and I don't do that unless I'm in a full-on relationship with them. My daughter would never meet them. So I was kind of uncomfortable with it. But I was like, you can come in for a cup of tea, once she's fast asleep. But just to say, nothing will be happening. Nothing. And he was like, oh, yeah. You know what I mean? You just have to be very clear. And I'm a confidence coach, so I'm not afraid to use my voice. But a lot of people aren't. They are not comfortable to say, I'm a bit uncomfortable with that. And is there an expectation? And I really want to take away and to get to know you better, but I don't want to be doing anything else yet. I think a lot of confusion with dating is the unsaid.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to pick up on that point. It is all about communication. You said quite clearly that actually you're confident enough to be able to do that and have that clarity. But I think if that communication is missing, then that's when it almost becomes like you risk at the early stages of a relationship making it awkward. When it's not awkward. It's just being able to communicate kind of a clear boundary, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the opposite of anxiety is honesty.
Yeah.
Ooh. That's
so
right in that down.
If you're feeling really anxious about maybe a dating scenario, the best thing you can do is just be honest about it. You don't have to go into massive detail. You don't need to be like, oh, I'm anxious because I've got this trauma or whatever. No, don't be doing that. But you could say, feel a little bit nervous, a bit nervous about this. I think I'm being a bit of pressure. And just leave it there. And if you're dating a decent person, and this goes for men and women both ways, they'll be like, oh, tell me more about it. How can I make you feel more relaxed? And it would be a connecting conversation. And it's the same thing with mental health. We talk about it so much, that actually vulnerability is connection.
Yeah.
So sharing your feelings connects you with people, even though it doesn't feel like it's going to, and it's terrifying to say when you're feeling down or anxious or worried about something, but actually you'll find so often it connects you to somebody when you share it.
Well, all I was going to say was that the times when, I've been able to observe other people's dates, namely first dates on TV, exactly what you've just said about that whole, they arrive, one says to the other, how are you feeling? And if the other one says, I'm feeling a little bit nervous, and the other one says, oh gosh, me too, you feel as if there is a bond there already because they have been honest about how they feel and they've shared it.
You articulated really clearly about how you would say, so a guy says, actually, shall I come over for a takeaway? You would be confident enough to be able to say, look, this is my boundary and these are my reasons. What advice, because it's often perceived, I think, for men, that men will lead on that. So what advice would you give a guy who actually was in that situation where actually it was a partner who was suggesting to him, actually, I'll come over for a takeaway, and they weren't quite ready. Could you help them kind of navigate how they would articulate that?
Yeah. I would say something along the lines of, I really look forward to doing that with you down the line when things are a bit more cemented between us. But for now, I'd really like to treat you and take you out.
Ah, absolute gold. Absolute gold.
That is gold. That links into a question later on.
Because it does two things. It doesn't make the girl feel rejected or deflated because you're saying, I'm really looking forward to doing that in the future. So that does something that's really important for a woman. It makes you feel safe. Oh, he's actually thinking about me longer term. This makes me feel safe, which we won't get into this because it's a whole nother podcast, but feminine, masculine energy. Okay. feminine, masculine energy is so important with dating. And if a man wants to be in a healthy masculine energy, you know, the key things are protective, make someone feel safe, lead. Like you were just saying, it's expected for the man to lead. Now, for a woman, if a man is leading in a honest and gentle way, like I've just given that example, that puts her in a safety of, oh, he's thinking about the future with me. Okay, that's made me feel not anxious about the fact he doesn't really want to have a takeaway. And not only that, like he really wants to take me out, and that's so thoughtful and nice. So it creates this safety, but also like a flattered feeling of, oh, he wants to like show me off and take me out. Because so many things, like talking about like modern dating, like what's the word for like terminology? So, you know, with situationships, which seem to be a modern dating pain in the ass, where no one's really communicating what anything is. Everybody's, you know, too scared to ask, and they end up in these scenarios. And I think I can sniff out a situationship guy, so quickly, because they'll be so quick to rush you to, oh, why don't you come tonight? Before you've even met them sometimes. Oh, do you want to come over? No, not really. I don't want to get murdered. I don't know you. You know, very quick to rush you to their house, very quick to do all that sort of stuff. And you can tell straight away, like, okay, I can see where the intent, you know, and it goes both ways, I'm sure. But I think that situationships are quite often like, come to mine for a takeaway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's either a situationship or a full relationship, takeaways to me.
Yeah.
Dating, it's like dating is about two people getting to know each other and connecting and seeing if there's enough aligning values, personality, sense of humor for this to be anything more than just two people hanging out, you know? And you can just do that in so many other ways than sitting in front of the TV and having a takeaway, I think.
This is true, and I agree with that. I wonder, Claire, if you think there's a difference across the ages and generations. One of the things to do with sex at the start of a relationship, I can remember thinking, that being too explicit or showing too much, that when I was in my early 20s, I was in a relationship that was based purely on sex, which I later discovered that relationship wasn't going to work. But I could have been in an equally meaningful relationship with a watermelon at that point, because like you're in your early 20s and this kind of all you think about. I feel as if now in my mid 40s and having been dating that I approach it from a totally different mindset now. Do you think that's the same for women? Is dating different now based on your age, or is it just different now based on that it's 2024 and not 2004?
I'm going to be totally honest. It's gone down the pan. So my earliest memories of dating and like my first relationships were really romantic and really organic. Obviously it wasn't the age of Facebook dating apps. So the people I ended up dating, one of them I met in a barbershop. He was cutting somebody's hair that I was with and he asked me out. Another one I was filming for a A-level project, bless my heart, Bath College. And I interviewed him and I thought he's cute. And then I kept bumping into him and then we ended up dating. It was all very rom-com. It was all very organic, you know, connecting, quite liking each other and then ending up dating down the line. And these guys, you know, they were what, like 17 at best, 17, 18. They were taking me on proper dates. Now, I have had this conversation with so many friends and I've been like, I feel like I was treated better by not all men, but I was treated better there was a higher percentage of better treatment and wooing by 17, 18-year-old boys. Now, was that because they didn't have any experience and so they were overexcited and it was the first time they'd done it too and they were doing what they'd seen on the movies? Or had they just not got tainted yet? Had they not had their heart broken? Had they not spent money and then the girl sacked them off and then they thought, I'm not doing that again? I don't know. But all I can say is my memories of early boyfriends and early dating are like lovely. No disrespect, no trying to shag me, like literally. And then my experience of dating in the last 5 years, so much more bad behavior. And, you know, men that don't necessarily, there's still really great men. I had really great experiences too, but I have also had bad experiences and sometimes like shocking experiences. And I'm like, wow, like what happened? So I don't know. What's your thoughts? There's two guys, you know, who have been dating, have been married, divorced.
Not
What
to each other,
happens?
by the way.
Not to each other. What's your thoughts on it?
I've got a thought that sprung to mind instantly, really, when you were talking, and it's the idea of when the examples you're giving, where you know you're kind of 17, and it's that organic kind of meeting. The pool was much smaller, wasn't it? Because there wasn't the online dating. If you happen to bump into somebody, whether it be at the barber shop or whether it be, you know, because you're filming your A-level work, whatever it is, you're like, oh, okay, like I've made this connection and I'm really going to like put my time and effort and energy into that. You know, I came across sort of fairly recently that idea of the grass isn't greener on the other side, the grass is greener where you water it. And I think so what you did, you watered that relationship much better. I think the challenge that men and women have got today is that there's just these shops everywhere for dating and pretty much anything else that you want to find, I suppose. So rather than kind of making this connection and being like, right, I'm going to pursue this and I'm going to take them out and we're going to do something nice and I'm going to think about ways that I can impress them and charm them and you know, do nice things. It's like, okay, well, I'll put a few drops over there, but then I've got all this other stuff that I'm going to try and walk. And eventually what happens is you just end up not watering anything really. And I wonder if that is a big part of like dating in today's world.
Yeah, it's the conveyor belt of alternate options, and it's like there's always other options that you could just try out, but also adding to that dating fatigue, which is a legit thing. I've had it where I'm just like, I'm exhausted. Like I've just been chatting to maybe a couple of people, but it's when you have, you know, a busy life, you might have kids, busy job, and then you're trying to fit in kind of getting to know somebody online, which doesn't feel that organic and it can feel quite dull and boring. It's quite tiring. So I don't know if I've just said to friends of late, like I didn't date for ages, came out of a relationship just over a year ago, and then I dabbled a little bit with Hinge and just got a real vibe of just the men were just quite tired. Like they'd actually turn up and be like, oh, knackered. And I'm like, okay, like they just seemed a bit worn out. And I think probably they'd been burning the candle when it came to Hinge. They'd been over hinging. And, you know, therefore they had this great lady in front of them and they were like, yeah, you're really nice and lovely. But they're just a bit knackered. Like there wasn't an excitement from them. And I was just a bit like, okay, like you could get in your head about that. You could be like, oh, I'm just not exciting. I didn't. I was just like, well, either not their bag, which is fine because I don't think dating's personal, or it's just that they are fatigued by dating and therefore they're just kind of not really in the right space. They need to just take a bit of time off. So I think it's a bit of that as well.
Could it be, Claire, that it feels tiring when you're seeing if you can get a connection with someone and they're not the right person? Could it be, and you get, in the modern world, you get more and more opportunity to try a person, no, they were wrong, try a person, no, they were wrong, and you go through those people far more quickly. But is it necessarily bad that it's tiring engaging with the wrong person with the hope that eventually you'd find the right person and it would feel like a piece of cake.
Yeah. And there's things you can do to stop that. So to stop dating so many of the wrong people, you need to have a strong filter and be really clear on what your deal breakers are and really clear on what your values are when you're even swiping.
Yeah.
There's just certain things you're like, no, that's deal breaker, And I wouldn't even go down that path, even if she's fit. Like, she's hot. But if one of those things is a deal breaker, just don't even bother. You're wasting your time.
Yeah.
Because at some point that will still be a problem for you. So it's being really firm with your boundaries around what you're looking for, what are deal breakers for you, and whether they seem like they've got sort of similar values, which you don't tend to find that out until a couple of dates anyway. But I think, in my opinion, in this modern day of dating, people overdate. They date too many people. I'm really selective about who I say yes to on dates now. I overdated probably 8 years ago. Now I'm really because for me, I'm a really busy person. I've got limited time and I value my time. And you guys are too. And I'm a single parent. So if I'm getting a babysitter for my little girl, taking precious time away from her, you're going to have to be worth it. You are going to have to be ticking a lot of my boxes. And I think that means that I have more of that excitement, when I do go on a date, because I've already filtered quite well. So I know that we're probably, and I also voice note a little bit before dates. So I can just get a feel of them. Like weird things like voices and stuff are really important to me. I think it's a big part of attraction. And if you've heard someone's voice and you kind of connect on that level and you think, okay, we've got a little bit of something going, there's a level of comfort now that makes a date less anxiety inducing and you're a bit more excited about it. But I do think that people are over dating. And I just think that feeds into as well a lot of the stuff around who should pay for the date and all of that stuff, because men who are over dating, fair enough, they're just I'm skint, can we go halves?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're asking a woman to go halves on a first or second date, it is going to change the way the woman thinks about you.
Yes.
100%.
Well, we come on to that later. So we're going to go into a couple of silly little would you rathers. And our rationale for this is that men are used to talking to other men in silly ways, like asking silly would you rather questions. But we're going to try to stir in some stuff that might sort of touch on mental health around that. But we always start with a fun one. So, Claire, would you rather date? And this, you don't have to marry this guy. You just go out on a date with and be dating, seeing Chris Hemsworth. He's got no hands.
Okay.
Or Chris Evans, the guy that plays Captain America, and his elbows don't bend in the middle. He's just got straight arms, like a toy soldier.
Chris Hemsworth, because has he got a mouth and tongue? I think hands are that. It would be frustrating without the hands. But I've had this conversation. This is an interesting question, really, limbs not being there. I've had this conversation with various boyfriends. That sort of thing doesn't bother me.
What on earth did your boyfriends... Were you holding a chainsaw at the time?
No, we were having conversations about, if you lost your leg, would it bother you? With just stupid conversations you have with people. And I was absolutely wouldn't bother me at all. It really wouldn't. I would totally date someone that had one leg or whatever. So I'm more about a face. And I prefer Chris Hemsworth's last name's face and find him really attractive just to look at. So the hands thing wouldn't bother me. We'll find a way around it.
So part of the rationale for that question was that one of the things that I noticed on dating sites was a lot of women saying that they were strangely attracted to hands. No women said they were strangely attracted to arms that don't bend at the elbow. But I find that slightly interesting because I've only ever thought of hands as being really functional rather than a thing to show off.
Hands are very sexy. I also always do look at a man's hands, but it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me. If the rest of them I found attractive, am I really going to be that shallow that because they haven't got a hand? I don't know.
Well, there's the whole holding you thing and
yeah, that would be tough, but they'd still have arms, so they could still give you a hug.
True. Yeah.
They could still spoon you, which I think that's the connecting thing you do at night time, right? When you go to sleep, someone's spooning you. That
Not
would
in
still
this
be
weather,
possible.
Claire.
Yeah, actually, true. This is a good time to be single. It's too sticky to be spooning. So, but yeah, I think you could still have a cuddle. It would be a bit sad that they couldn't like hold your face when they kissed you. That would be a bit sad. But like someone with poker straight arms, I'm not sure I'd be into that. Because you couldn't hug with poker straight arms.
Well,
No.
no, but you could give like a little shoulder press from a distance. Like,
Yeah. I'm not sure how sexy that would be. I think I'd rather just stunts.
right. I think I already probably could have a good guess at what your answer for this would be. But would you rather date a guy who has told you, not like mega early on, but in the initial chat phase, before you've left the dating app, he's told you at that point that he is in therapy, he's having some sort of therapy, or a guy who at the same phase has told you he does not believe in therapy? Who would you rather date?
Obviously, the man in therapy. Like, hallelujah. Like, that to me is a turn on. Like, I have a therapist. Brilliant. Amazing. What's their name? Tell me all about them. Brilliant. Like, I find it a huge turn on when a man shows self-reflection, shows ownership for their mental health, you know, will happily sit with someone they don't know and be uncomfortable and talk about their feelings. That to me is sexy. Someone saying, I don't believe in therapy, ick. No.
But what do you think most men would have thought your answer would be?
Probably the don't believe in therapy, because I think that so many men have this huge fear around, first of all, saying that they need help, which I get because it doesn't feel masculine, I suppose, to them. You know, it feels a bit not, oh, I'm not, you know, manly because I need a bit of help. But it's such a myth. And any woman that would be like, oh God, he's in therapy, red flag. Like that is not a self-developed woman. You know, I think that famous saying, you can only meet people as deeply as they've met themselves. Like that's my borderline for dating, because if someone's coming at it from, I don't believe in therapy, they've not met themselves deeply. It's not for me. Like I'm deep, you know, like I got layers.
I think it's so good just for our listeners to hear that, I think, because, you know, I mean, a big part of the reason why we just started this podcast in the first place was to be able to get men to talk about it and dispel myths. So to hear you say that, you know, and it not come from me or Matt, like actually here is, you know, a confident woman who kind of knows what she wants. Like here she is saying, actually, 100%, the guy who's in therapy, who is reflecting, who is learning, who is developing themselves. And I just think you just put it so brilliantly. I just don't think we could sort of replay that bit enough.
Yeah, it's just, it's hard and frustrating to feel that in this day and age that, yeah, guys do still feel like it's something to be ashamed of, when most of my friends have been to therapy or had you know, have a therapist or have been to therapy and are pro it, and I know that none of them would find it unattractive. And you know, people there, married friends of mine, their husbands have had therapy too when they've gone through. But you know, also is a key thing and why it would really put me off.
Go on.
So if someone's saying I don't believe in therapy, then where I go to, because what I actually wanted to do about 10 years ago was be a relationship therapist, which I still would quite like to be honest. So if someone was saying that to me, I would be thinking, so if we're in a relationship together and you're my long-term partner and we go through a rocky patch, you would not be open to relationship therapy. And I think relationship therapy is amazing. Whether it's to clarify you're not right for each other, whether it's to clarify that there's still a lot there to fight for, it's so important, I think. And I think if somebody is saying now, I don't believe in it, it kind of just puts me off, because I just think, well, then you wouldn't fight for us. You wouldn't have that openness to sit in a room and talk about why we're struggling. So it would put me off in that sense as well, thinking about the future.
And I think so many men have got that exact word that we've said over and again, like misconceptions about therapy and about admitting that you need help, but admitting it from a personal point of view, but also admitting it from a couple's or a relationship point of view, that actually that incorrect idea that admitting that it needs help is like the final nail in the coffin, and that it's that ends the relationship, or it's that deflates you as a person completely. Whereas those of us that have experienced anything like that know it's the total opposite. Know that it is the dawn of a new day, and it is actually working out that things can get better from here, rather than realizing it's the end. We're in therapy. I'm in therapy. It's all gone to shit.
Yeah. In a really, really healthy relationship, and this is the sort of relationship that I'm aiming for next, I have a technique that a famous lady, Brené Brown, said about with her husband and what she does. And they check in daily about where they are out of 100. So she could be like, I'm on 80% today. I'm feeling great. I'm pretty much smashing out. I'm a bit tired. And then he could be like, I'm on 100, so I can cover your 20%. Don't worry, I'll cook dinner. And if you're checking in like that regularly with your partner, and you're coming in with, I'm on 10%, I haven't slept, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm feeling a bit down, then with that communication about how you were genuinely feeling, your wife, partner, whoever can step in. And if they're in a good place, say, don't worry, I've got you. What can I do? How can I help? I'll cover you. I'll make life easier. This is how we can. And that's what would make the relationship work.
Yeah.
Is that you're openly communicating how you feel daily, or at least weekly. I think it's important weekly to be checking in with how you're both feeling in life and in the relationship. So, when you made that cup of coffee for me the other morning, it was really thoughtful and it meant a lot to me. And then you're like, oh, did it? Okay, cool. And then that could be something you do more of, I'd like it if you complimented me a bit more. Sometimes I feel like you don't really see me. Okay, fair enough. Like, just constant communication about how you feel in life, mentally, physically, and how you feel as a couple, I think is key to something working or not.
And one of the pieces of advice that I would pass on to our listeners, that's sadly not from a relationship of mine, but it is my next door neighbours. I'm confident they don't listen to the podcast, but if they do, hi guys. But today, I won't name them, but today the husband and father was clearing out the garage, and the wife mother called out from the back garden, because you can see the garages from the back garden, can I get you anything? Do you need a drink? And it was like, that is this big. That's really small. But I really felt like that is a healthy relationship going on there, of just that little thought. Because for her to walk to the kitchen, he called out, oh yeah, I'd love a glass of water. For her to walk to the kitchen, fill up a glass of water, bring it to him, is 30 seconds out of a day. But actually the gesture is enormous. And I think it's things like that make relationships work.
Because do you know the thing that often goes in relationships, and I think especially when you've had kids, is a level of care. So her saying, do you need anything? Would you like a drink? Is her caring for him. I care for you. You're working really hard. It's really hot. You're probably getting really dehydrated. Can I do something for you? And like, if it's something, heavy labor she can't help with, she's like, how can I help? It's that nurturing feminine vibe, right? So he feels cared for and nurtured. And I think quite often when people have kids, they're putting so much care into their kids.
Yes.
They stop saying, darling, like, what can I do for you? Like, how can I care for you? And that is, again, another conversation. It's a bit like love languages. Like, how do you like to be cared for? How do you, like, what are the things that I do that you then feel really cared for? And it's a bit like love languages, because everybody's will be different.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as getting you a cold beer when you're doing DIY. Or it could be, just asking how my day is and giving me a hug when I come through the door. Everybody's just so different, and they're things that no one's psychic. Like, we're all different, and we have to share this stuff so that the people we're dating or in relationships know how to care for us and know how to love us. But you're right, that sounds to me like a relationship where there's still love and care going on.
Yeah. Just in case anybody's listening that cares, words of affirmation for me. That's a big thing for Matt. Just putting that out there. Brad, sorry, what were you going to say?
I think, you keep coming back to what is essentially the same point, or not the same point, but the same thing, which is communication. And I think we know that's crucial. We talked about the idea of kind of therapy and marriage counselling. I thought that was a really unique take on it, actually, the view that if we needed to go down that route down the line, you wouldn't invest. But there's just that stigma to it, isn't there? That actually therapy is, like you said, Matt, it's the final nail, isn't it? It's all falling apart. As opposed to, like, why can't it be about how we just get better? Like, we don't need to wait for there to be a problem. Like, we can do this in order to get better, to understand how to communicate better in the way that you're talking about. Because we don't do that with other stuff. Like, if someone's getting into the gym and they're like, okay, I'm struggling a little bit. How am I going to get better? Or I'm going to like speak to a personal trainer, or I'm going to speak to someone who knows like what they're doing. We seek out advice. If it's work, we seek out somebody more experienced. We do it in all of those other areas, don't we? But if it comes to the idea of kind of therapy, whether it's self or relationship, there's this stupid stigma attached to it all the time. And it's
just stupid, isn't it?
And it's the hardest thing to succeed at. Relationships are really fucking hard. Like, even when you're the most self-developed, great communicator, patient, caring, we all bring stuff to the table. And especially when you meet people later in life, you both bring stuff to the table. And I think that it's a hard thing to navigate without support. And I've had relationship therapy twice, and both times were with he is now my ex-husband, but my point is, the first batch of relationship therapy, we had about 8 years into our relationship, and we were like really at a crisis point. And I can honestly say that we went from kind of crisis point to, after each of those sessions, me feeling more connected to him probably than I ever have before. Because he would say things in those sessions that he couldn't say to my face. Like nice things he noticed about me, things that he valued about me that he never really said to me. And even though we were navigating like a difficult situation, just those moments, talking about words of affirmation, one of mine is that too, Matt. So sitting in a therapy session and having my husband, who was not a particularly great communicator, he won't mind, I wang on about him a lot on my podcast. He would say things that he didn't normally say. And it was really bondless. I remember having really it was when we were living in London, we get the tube back, we'd have really romantic moments on the tube together. It was like bizarre. It was like almost magic what it did in those sessions. And then we went on to, that was before we got married. We went on to get married, and, we lasted sort of another 4 or 5 years. And then we had it at the end of our relationship. And it was still equally as helpful because it just kind of clarified where we were and that there wasn't really a way back. And we both moved away from it knowing that we'd literally done everything we could and that we were both clear on how we felt. There was that sort of closure that I think is really important for an end of a marriage, because even when things end messily, which if anyone's listened to my podcast, my marriage definitely ended in a not very nice, messy way. But we were still really clear and sure that we'd covered it and that there was still deep love there and that some stuff had happened that wasn't ideal, but fundamentally we still loved each other, but just too much had happened and it was just time to move on. And both times it brought me a level of clarity and peace, whether it helps the relationship or not. And there's just 2 examples of where it did help and where it still helped, but we didn't stay together. But I never came away from that relationship being like, what if? Because I knew we'd covered it all, and we'd really tried. So I just don't think there should be that stigma. You're not a failure because you want somebody who's a professional at relationship dynamics, which, let's face it, most of us aren't, to sit in a room and be unbiased and listen to you both, and more than anything, make you hear each other, because that's what stops happening in relationships. It's point scoring. It's you did that and then you've said that and that's triggered me and I'm going to say this, and it's so messy. There's actually an amazing program called In Therapy on Channel 4, and I'm literally just watching an incredible relationship therapist with couples, and it's so fascinating. A lot of her job is just helping them hear each other and see each other. Being seen and being heard are 2 things as well that are essential, I think, in relationships.
And something that I shared with Brad, was it this week even, or last week? It was a thing that I'd heard on another male mental health podcast, one of the actually good ones. A lot of them are terrible. And it was about how nothing will erode intimacy in a relationship quicker than resentment. And that,
oh my God, yeah.
Like you talked about with when you've had kids and there's a lack of care from one partner to the other. Also, when you've had kids and you feel like there's an unequal division of labour, maybe whoever's staying at home with the kids feels like, well, I'm at home with the kids all week, so the weekend is my time to do my thing. Whereas whoever's not at home with the kids feels like, well, I'm at work all week, so the weekend's my time to do my thing. So that you get that conflict, and that if you don't address that resentment quickly and early on, like the theme that we seem to be circling around, being open and honest communication, that if you don't address that resentment really quickly, it's that can erode the intimacy, and then the relationship can start to fall apart from there.
Resentment is absolutely the number one reason people break up. This resentment is a very, if you know anything about vibrations, you know, joy being a high vibration, shame being a low one, resentment is a very low vibration. So if you're both in resentment and you're both living in the same environment, you are low vibe. That is just not a comfortable space to be in. And that's not going to be inspiring romance or healthy conversations. And the thing is, there's not an issue with feeling resentful, but again, it comes back to communication. There's an issue with not saying it.
Yeah.
And feeling resentful, I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if it's fair for me to feel resentful, but I'm feeling quite resentful that you've been at work a week. I've had the kids. It's been hell. And I feel like I need a bit of a break, and you're off going on your bike or whatever. You know, it's saying I feel like, without being like you're in the wrong. It's saying I feel this way. Let's talk about it. Yeah.
I think it's so relatable what you said, you know, for me personally, you know, having been through marriage counselling as well. And I genuinely, I thought it was amazing. The way that we were able to talk to one another, the way that you had somebody there who to ask all the right questions and to navigate the difficult conversations, because, you know, I kind of was in this sort of cycle of, am I that rubbish at communicating? And actually, I don't think I'm that bad at communicating, but in that context, I was, for whatever reason, whether it was like fear of putting my foot in my mouth or saying the wrong thing and then it coming back to bite me or whatever. So it just gave that freedom to be able to talk and to say things and a framework to kind of put things across. I noticed you said then, I feel. And that was one of the things I always remember the marriage counsellor saying to us. It's like, you can't take that away from anybody, because how they feel is just how they feel. So it's a safe way to communicate something. And it was. And I remember like speaking to mates, I'm like, you guys should go. Like, this is great. It's really different to, again, the stigma that's out there. And it just gives you that framework. And I think if you've got that, even if you go through it and, you know, the marriage or the relationship doesn't work, you've still got all of that learning, which you can then apply. And ultimately, that's the kind of difference of where we are now, which is the great irony, isn't it? That actually, when you were dating as a 17-year-old, guys were really treating you, and actually we all should know better now, but because of circumstance around everybody, it's gone another way. But it's hugely valuable to get that experience, you know, to understand how to communicate, because if you get that right, you're a good way there, aren't you?
I would just want to say, just to highlight, because I don't want people to, because what you've just said, Brad, is spot on. Like, I'm usually a really good communicator, but something about this dynamic, I feel like I can't speak, or I say the wrong thing. That is so it's just universal. That is so common. That in loving relationship dynamics, that's where we're struggling to communicate. We could communicate amazingly at work with our kids and with our friends, but we get in that dynamic and suddenly it just turns to shit. And you're like, why? And it's because it can be a range of things. It can be because resentments have built up, and someone they don't have their listening ears on. They're so up to here with the resentment that they're just not willing to hear you or see you in your vulnerable state and how you're trying to communicate. So they're just not, you know, that sort of thing. Or it is because you deeply love this person and you're scared to death that it's going to end. And there's a lot of fear around being vulnerable. Or if I really say this out loud, could this end it? And I think it's that stuff that in the rest of our life, we're a bit like, well, I'm just going to say it. You know, you might be a bit cautious, but you'll still do it anyway. But when it's the person you love and you're married to them or whatever, and you own a house, and like, there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. This could let off a ball, me saying that. And I think it's the intimacy you have with that person that makes it so difficult to communicate. But the irony is the lack of communicating throughout that's got you to that place.
Claire, you are a hammer hitting nails on the head. Bang, bang, bang. Claire, are you ready for your next Would You Rather?
Yeah.
So you touched on earlier the idea around masculinity and femininity and how the two of those work in a dating context. One of the things that I've been reading around a little bit recently is that there's this male tendency to feel as if we need to, and it's the three Ps, procreate, so reproduce, have babies, have sex, provide and protect. Okay. So would you rather, and again, your answer is your answer. You're not representative of all of womankind. It is literally just your answer. Would you rather date a guy who you feel like he could completely provide for you? You never need to put your hand in your pocket ever. He's going to take care of everything from the first date onwards, but he's rubbish in bed and you don't feel safe with him.
Oof.
Or would you rather date a guy who you feel really safe with, but he's equally as crap in bed and he can't provide for you? He literally doesn't have the means. He's either low paid or unemployed, so he can't afford to provide for you, but he can make you feel safe. Or there's a third guy, the guy who's absolute dynamite in the sack, but he lacks the means to provide for you and he doesn't make you feel safe. So basically, which one is more important to you?
Awful.
You've got to date one. Because if I said that it was a guy that's got two of them and another guy that's got two of them and another guy that's got two of them, then you're choosing from good guys. I want to know which is more important to you. How good they are in bed, how able they are to provide for you, and how able they are to make you feel safe.
Okay, right. I'm going to be as honest as I can possibly. I wouldn't date any of those men.
You have to.
But if I had to date one of them, I would date number 3 for the great sex, but he would be in the category of this is just fun, short term. Like, this is a relationship of sorts, but like, this is not my person. I've never been in a relationship with someone that didn't make me feel safe. Well, I have been, but I'm never doing that again. We learn along the line, don't we? If someone doesn't make you feel really safe and is dynamic, sometimes you reflect and go, I'd never do that again. So that's something I wouldn't do again. And the providing thing, it is hugely attractive when a man can provide, but I think men can provide in different ways. It doesn't have to always be money. They can provide an emotional space for you to talk about your feelings and your day, and they can, provide safety in that sense and provide that. They can fulfill your needs in that way, and they can still provide with money, but in the sense of you can still provide and take someone on a date or whatever, but do something that you can afford. Yeah. And you can still be a gentleman. And this is where I'm like, why are people not getting this? If you haven't got much money and you can't afford to take a woman on a 3-course meal and provide in that sense, how can you still be in a healthy masculine energy and still be attractive to that woman and still make that woman feel kind of special? Take her on a picnic that you've organised and bring a bloody French stick and a bit of cheese and a cheap bottle of wine and that you can afford, but you've organised it. It's quite romantic and it's thoughtful, and that's still providing. It's still making a woman feel nurtured and cared for, but it hasn't broken the bank. You're not going into your overdraft because you can't afford it. There's still ways to be romantic and masculine and providing without being loaded, I think is my answer. But yeah, I've picked number 3 because bad sex is just a hell. I just can't. No.
What about no sex? I'm aware of numerous couples that are the same age as the three of us or thereabouts that have been married for a long time and their marriages are basically sexless.
Yeah, to me that's the most depressing thing ever.
Okay, fair enough.
Because I understand it, people do it from a financial point of view, or they might not be that high, they might not have a very high sex drive and they're kind of happy to be companions. But I do have a sex drive.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to not have sex when I'm single because I'm being selective, because I'm very selective about who I let into that arena. But
sorry, I just got your pause over arena. That was great.
But I think sex is so important in a relationship. And I think if it's crap or it's not happening, you're not connecting.
Do you think so?
Yeah. And if you are, you're mates.
I wonder.
I think there's I got two thoughts, and the first one's a little throwback one because I didn't want to interrupt. I wonder if there is a pressure there for men, young men particularly, in terms of that provider role and the sorts of things that young men are digesting. So the whole millionaire, top G, all of that stuff, it's not seen as and it's not seen as if you're not in that top 1%, then you have no worth. I think that's something that men are challenged about. So there's a pressure there, but there's also probably a pressure around that kind of sexual connection as well, and probably. Again, like it maybe is another podcast really in terms of that whole idea of actually, a lot of online dating probably is about, people just wanting hookups. But then what do you do when you meet that person that actually means something, and the kind of anxiety that can bring, I suppose, and pressure and like, oh my God, like what? And so I guess I'm prompted to that question, hearing you talk about that and being like, the sex has got to be good. And I think you're right. But I worry about particularly young men, about the perception of what they believe that to be, because I think it's different for men and women.
Oh my God. Yeah, right. When I say it's got to be good, I just mean it's got to be compatible. Like, we need to be sexually compatible. People's opinion on what's good differs massively.
Yeah.
And what I consider good is connective, sensual. It's not Pornhub, wham bam. Like, no, thank you. And that's what a lot of young lads are digesting, and they're watching that thinking, oh yeah, like this is what girls like, and like they don't. And if they do, it's a small percentage, or they've just not experienced sensual, connecting, romantic sex. And I like, don't get me wrong, I think there's different sex for different times, and I think we can all like a bit of everything. But I think that, like, absolutely, just to clarify, I absolutely do not expect to have a perfect first shack with someone. Like, it's just not, it just doesn't happen, does it? Because if you do like them, you're nervous and you feel a bit awkward, especially when you're naked or whatever, and it all feels a bit awkward. But, or you just haven't got to know each other's body yet, and that takes time. So I absolutely do not. I would never be harsh enough to be like, well, that was crap. No, absolutely not. I think that if everything else is great and you really get on and you feel connected to them, you feel quite safe with them. That's why I said to Matt, I wouldn't date any of those men, because the safety thing is quite important.
Yeah.
If that you feel quite safe and everything else is ticking boxes and the sex isn't that great, that can be changed. And that, again, takes conversations.
But I bet that comes from the exact same place as that aversion to therapy. I would guess that there are a lot of men who would not want to engage in a conversation with their partner when that conversation is, we need to change our sex life. You need to start doing this differently. I think they would have real concerns about being in that conversation. Whereas I think it's likely to be exactly what we said about therapy, in that actually it's not the end, it's the start of a new beginning, and this is where it starts to get good. But I think there are a lot of men that would think, if you think I'm crap at sex, that's fine, we just won't have sex.
There's two things around that. And it's down to the woman. So how you deliver what you're saying is very important. So you always start it off with, I love getting to know you. I find you so attractive. I'm really getting feelings for you. But I feel like we could improve. Like, we could be a bit more connected when we're having sex. So you're delivering it. You're creating the safety at the beginning of the conversation. Like, I'm not about to stump you. I really like you. And I tell you this because I want this to work. So you're creating that safety at the start. And I think women maybe aren't so great at doing that. They're kind of just like, oh, you're not doing that right. And that can make a man feel crap, which obviously it would. Or you do it in the moment in a bit of a sexy way. You're not being like, what are you doing? You're doing do more of that. That's really good. It's how you're delivering it.
So yeah, we deliver this whole podcast in a sexy way. We're used to it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just how it's delivered, I think, is quite, because it's a sensitive subject. And if a guy is saying it to a woman, which they do, guys like particular things, you'd also want it to be delivered sensitively. Like, I really love everything about our sex life, but there's just one thing that I'd like it if you did this differently. you just deliver it in a space that makes the person not feel ridiculed and like humiliated and like, oh, they don't like me, and
So I think again, like we're back to talking about communication, aren't we? And we're back to talking about a safe space in order to be able to communicate. And that's something we've just kind of talked about on a very recent podcast where actually, how do men open up? Well, it's about creating that safe environment, and it can be daunting, I think, for everybody in a relationship. Like how do you say those things that are ultimately because they're going to make things better and you want the relationship to work without it being, coming across as a dig. And it's about that communication and safe space, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the key thing to mention here, seeing we're talking about mental health, is that a bad relationship or a relationship going south quickly is so bad for your mental health. Our mental health is largely based on who we're spending the most time with, whether that's your colleagues at work, your boss, but it's the person you're living with or in a relationship with too. And having a relationship that you're really unfulfilled or really unhappy and you feel really unappreciated, or you don't know if they fancy you anymore, and any of those things, your mental health is going to be really getting knocked. So my message is, this is good for your mental health. Having these conversations will be better for your mental health than not having them. So feeling slightly awkward or feeling like, oh, I don't know if this means we're going to last. If it means that you don't last and you break up because you finally said how you felt about something, then you've still saved your mental health down the line. In the meantime, it might be quite tricky and you're going to have to ride it out. But in the long term, you've still helped yourself out because you're not just staying in something which is miserable because you're too scared to sort it out. And I think it's just an important point, isn't it? It does. We'll all know from when we were in relationships that weren't working, it makes you ill, like,
Yes.
mentally, physically.
Yeah. And just that whole idea that if you're not prioritizing your mental health in your day-to-day existence, and there are things that you could do to benefit your mental health and you're not doing them, why the fuck aren't you doing them? Why would you not do that? It's much like knowing there's something that could instantly make you 10% stronger, physically stronger, and thinking, oh, I'll leave that. I don't really want that or need that. Because mental health is such a grey area, we know what goes in terms of the environment. We know what comes out in terms of our behaviour, but we don't really know as much about what goes on inside our brains. I mean, we know what sort of is responsible for what, but it's still a bit of a puzzle as to what's going on inside our brains in terms of how our thoughts and feelings and emotions all interact with each other. I think because of that, we tend to just think it's unseen. I'll put it to the back of my mind. I'll leave it. But when you do prioritize your mental health, you feel obviously enormously well and just happy in your own existence. And why would you want to be anything else? Yeah,
exactly. I totally agree.
So, Claire, our kind of finishing questions, we normally get our guests to have 1 minute and 1 minute alone. And usually it's to talk to their younger selves, an 8-year-old version, an 18-year-old version, and then finally an 80-year-old version. So we're going to have a little bit of a play on that. I want you to imagine that the Claire of old just about to go on her first ever date. Okay? You've got 1 minute to talk to Claire just before she goes on that first ever date. What are you saying?
Oh, how PG should I use? Okay. I would just say, have fun, enjoy it, be yourself, and don't think too much about whether you're going to end up with them. You probably won't. Just have fun.
And how old were you then, Claire?
I mean, I was quite late, but I say late bloomer. I was 16, I think, but I'd gone to a girls' school and I didn't kiss anyone until I was 16. Which is late bloomer, right?
I think we just worked out what happened on that first date.
Oh, no, I obviously had many a snog before him. But yeah, went to a girls' school. I didn't know any boys. I wasn't around any boys. I don't have any brothers. I'm from a very female family. Not all of my mates were girls. They had sisters. I just wasn't around boys. So I made a decision when I was going into sixth form that I'm going to Bath College and I'm doing sixth form there because I need to be around boys. And they've got a sports science section. So
That's where all the handsome guys go.
And they were. It was the correct choice. I went with my intuition. So I purposely was like, I need to get myself out there because I knew that I was behind. But actually, like, yeah, with him, he was the first person I suppose I ever went out with. He was the one I met in a barbershop, and he was really sweet. But yeah, we were absolutely not compatible in the slightest. But he was lovely, and it went on for a few months. But I think it built my confidence up, and I think that's the key thing: have fun, be yourself, and just enjoy it, because it's just paving stones at that point. You're kind of learning what you like, things like who you are. Like at 16, you just don't know. And I wasn't confident at school. I was awkward. I had train tracks. I was like really skinny, really tall. Like I felt like no one would fancy me anyway. So going to college was like a real big thing. And I think I was so shocked when he asked me out. I don't know, someone actually likes me. That I kind of said yes just based on the fact he likes me. And I didn't think enough about whether I liked him, which I think is common.
Yeah.
Really common when you're young.
Yeah, and that's such a good little tip for people just to take away, isn't it? Is actually, because it's easy to feel. I think particularly if you have come out of a long-term relationship, rather than thinking actually what do I want, it's just sometimes you can feel a bit flattered and think, yeah, I'm going to go with that because actually here's somebody giving me a bit of attention, which I'm, may not have had for however long. So, okay, right, I'm going to stop you there because they're gone now. They're gone. So, I'm going to just adapt this one slightly. Thinking ahead, okay, into the future, you've got your crystal ball. You've got 1 minute with Claire before she goes on her next date. What are you telling her? You've got 1 minute.
How in the future are we talking?
Well, it depends when your next first date is.
Okay. I've got a date this week, actually, boys.
Smug.
Okay. I would say to her, stay focused. Don't overstep your own boundaries just because you fancy them. And stay curious. Just be curious. The best bit of advice, actually, that I would give myself again, but somebody gave me: go into dating with zero expectations, only curiosity. So I would remind myself of that, because it's really easy to set expectations, especially if you have already kind of chatted a bit to them and you think, oh yeah, I think I really quite like them and I think I'm going to fancy them, and then you create this expectation, and then if you go and it doesn't work or it doesn't go anywhere, then you feel really disappointed. So if you just go into it with absolutely no expectations, doesn't matter that you might get on, who knows, but you go in curious. I'm curious about this person. I'm curious to see where this goes. It saves you a lot of energy and heartache. I think it just keeps you focused on dating. What are the intentions here? My intention is to get to know somebody and work out if maybe this could be something. And the only way to do that is to stay curious and to not overstep my own boundaries. So that would be it, yeah.
I mean, that does put me in mind of that whole modern day dating is wondering why somebody's single and then finding out why they're single. So hopefully you're not curious in that regard, and then it gets discovered in that regard. But that's good advice, Claire.
I was just going to say 2 points. First one, I look forward to when we come back to this on Valentine's to find out how this first date went. That's coming up.
Zero expectations. We'll see.
Would your advice be any different for a man going into their first date? What would be their snippet, or do you think actually that's just sound advice for everybody?
I think it's sound advice for everybody. I do think men are more visual. Now, okay. I don't want to offend anyone by saying that, but I do think men can get a bit more sucked in by how physically attracted they are to somebody, and therefore they might forget to stay grounded in, but could I imagine them meeting my family? Could I imagine going on holiday with them? Could I imagine ever living with them? Do we have the same values? Rather than, oh my gosh, she's so hot, I just want to kiss her. Wow. Because a lot of men, from my experience I've dated, they seem to get very overexcited by them feeling attracted to me. But then I'm like, I'm more than that. But you need to get to know the rest of me to work out whether you like the whole package. Because I'm not just a tall blonde, And I think that men can get a little bit more swept up. So I would say, yeah, stay focused on what you're actually looking for. So if you are looking for a long-term partner, don't just base whether you're going to have a next date with them on how much you fancy them. Think about, would I actually have a relationship with you? I've actually got a quick question for you, because I've heard a statistic that men know within like 3 seconds or something whether somebody is like an absolute no, I'd sleep with them, or no, like proper like material for maybe a girlfriend, wife sort of thing. Like, you put them in categories in your brain straight away. Is that true?
I think we can do, but I don't know. I think it would be almost impossible to prove how well we do that. So I think we do it. I think I used to, like when I was dating, or like when I was on dating apps. Yeah, absolutely. It was no, yes, shag, but no. Like, that's not going to be a long-term thing, but if she's keen, then I'm keen. So yeah, easily in those categories. I used to pride myself on being honest about stuff like that. Like, I don't really see this going anywhere. And the point that I was going to raise a moment ago was that how I think both genders have got misconceptions about each other. So one of the misconceptions that I had about women going into dating was that it's only men that want only hookups. That is not true.
Not true.
That's 100% not true. And there are, I don't know about just as many, but there are women out there that want a physical intimacy without commitment. They exist. They 100% exist. And that was a shockwave to me. I was like, whoa, I didn't know you people existed. But they're like, yeah, we do. We're over here. Hi. And that place where they are is called Tinder. So that was a misconception that I had about women. But also that does exist in a sex positive way as well. Like you said earlier about the guy out of those 3 awful guys that you'd rather date, be the guy that'd be dynamite in the sack, but you wouldn't see it as a long-term thing. And there's no need for there to be any shame or guilt around that just because you're a woman, because men absolutely adopt that mindset with no shame and no guilt. And actually, I think probably it's fine for women to adopt that mindset. Although I do have a bit of a thing about actually sometimes women think they're matching men up here, but actually what they're doing is matching men down here. Like, descending to our level is not good. Like, if you're better than us, stay better than us. Don't try to come down to where we are.
Absolutely.
So that was the other misconception, that I think you'd be really surprised, and I know for definite, Brad and I have had these conversations over and over again, but to summarize, we've had conversations about matching with a girl on a dating app, or even just seeing a girl on a dating app, or going on a few dates, and then asking ourselves the question, could this woman ever meet my kids? If she can't, what's the point? I'm wasting my time, and time is our most valuable asset. I'm wasting my time if I could never envisage her meeting the kids. So what am I doing? What's the point? I know Brad said that to me, and I've said the same to him.
I totally agree. I do the same thing. But can I ask for you, what are the boundaries around a woman that could meet your kids and one that wouldn't? Would it be that, talking about feminine energy, would it be that she comes across quite nurturing and caring, and emotionally intelligent or whatever, and then you'd think, yeah, I can imagine her around my child because she's quite nurturing and caring, and I can imagine that, as opposed to a woman that's more like, it's more hookups, or they're just more about the sex. They're not making you feel that seen when you're hanging out with them, therefore you're not really getting that sort of feminine nurturing vibe, which is what we offer in general when it's right. So I just wondered, is that what's the thing that's made you not want to?
So my answer to that is another word that I think the 3 of us are fairly familiar with. I'm not sure all of our listeners will be familiar with, and that's boundaries. And that is somebody who has their own boundaries, knows that they have their own boundaries, respects their boundaries, but also can respect other people's boundaries. So the clearest example of that is when I've dated anyone that has kids. If she is prioritizing her kids over dating me, that is a huge turn on. That is like, you're good, you're decent. The ones that are like, nah, never mind the kids, we can go out. Like, I'll leave the 9-year-old in charge. Get away from me. Whereas I happen to be experimenting with being unsingle at the moment. I've
heard.
And she is someone who has her own boundaries and respects my boundaries. And it's that type of, what would I describe it as? Positive, self-aware behavior that makes me think, not now, of course not now, but at some point in the future, I think you're a healthy person for my kids to meet. That would be my answer to that.
Yeah. Oh, that's, I totally agree. It's an absolute deal breaker. Someone who's just not that asked about their kids and they're putting dating before it. And I'll get a babysitter any old. It's so unattractive.
Yeah.
Totally.
Or I'll bring the kids along.
Yeah, I've had a guy before say to me, "Oh, seeing we're both busy, should we just meet at the park with the kids?"
Yeah.
Or a soft play. I fucking hate soft plays. No, I don't want to date there.
This has just reminded me of a story, and I know we're all on the clock here. But I was chatting to a woman on Tinder once, and I was trying to get to meet her. And we were getting on great, but she was just never committing to actually meeting. She went quiet for like 2.5 days, and then she was back on chatting away, and I was still trying to pin her down to meet her, and she was still sort of being avoidant of the whole meeting. The 2.5 days in which she was quiet, she was giving birth. So she was a full 9 months pregnant on Tinder. We'll put the phone down for a minute, have a newborn. What'd you do after you've had a newborn? Back on Tinder, ovs. And she eventually came clean. She's like, "Oh, I really like you, but I've got a newborn." I was like, "I think you might need to prioritize that for now. Let's leave the dating."
She sounds like she might need to come to me for some self-esteem coaching. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, she was an interesting person.
Wow.
There it is. I've got one final question then before we come to takeaways. So it's again going down this road of 1 minute. So you're now going to get the chance to see 80-year-old you is going to come in, still looking equally glamorous. She walks in. You've got 1 minute, but you can only talk to her. You can only ask about kind of relationship advice, those sorts of things. What do you think you would talk to 80-year-old you about? What would you be keen to know?
Was it all worth it? I think I would just I feel like I'm 40 now, and I'm hoping from this point onwards it's just beautiful, non-drama, non-shitty related, like it's just all positives. So I'm hoping if I met me at 80, we'd be talking about my like delightful husband of 40 years or long-term partner and how I finally got it right. Like you did good, love. Like well done all that therapy and all that inner work that you did, because you really did break those patterns, and look what you ended up with. That would be my hope. I think, because I have put an incredible amount of time, money, and effort into learning from my mistakes, and I've definitely made some. And I think that I really prioritize my mental health, and where I'm not doing such a great job and where I am potentially causing bad patterns or ignoring my intuition or overstepping my boundaries, all those things we've talked about. And I think even in the last couple of years, it's shifted who I am in a good way. And I think that, I've been through it. Like if in my podcast, we talk about confidence themes. So themes in our life with confidence where we might thrive in other areas, but then in one area, we just haven't been that great in it. And I'd say relationships haven't been it's a difficult question. I was obviously in a very long-term relationship and a lot of it was really happy, but then it really did end quite badly. And then I've had a bit of a mixed bag since. So I would say so far that feels like my pillar of self-esteem I'm still working on it. It's been the one I've struggled with the most. So I'd really hope at 80 that we were just celebrating all what I'd learned and that it was all worth it. And that, when you work on the insides, the outsides take care of themselves. And that because I'd done that in work, I'd attracted in something really positive, and it'd all been worth it.
Bang in. Well, what a good answer.
I think the way that you've spoken about everything tonight is just kind of testament to all of that work that you've done. And it's really good. I've really enjoyed having you on the pod and listening to you. So. on that note, it comes to our takeaways. And so Matt, what's your takeaway?
Well, I think the irony is here that when we have a guest who speaks so well and understands the subject matter so thoroughly as Claire does, actually the takeaways are really clear and really explicit. So mine are very, very basic. The first being that therapy is not just good, but it can also be attractive, sexy, and a green flag. And I think that is contrary to what an awful lot of men, dating men in particular, might think or feel about themselves, that actually therapy might be cause for shame or embarrassment, but actually from Claire's perspective, and we said before that she's not representative of every woman on the planet, it's just from her own perspective, therapy is an attractive attribute about a man. So that's my first one. And the second one is that with dating, in the initial, like the theme just runs throughout, that in the initial phases, right up to long-term relationship, that communication is just always good. Early communication is better, but finding ways to communicate either through therapy or through just broaching it yourselves in your relationship, that communication is a massive, it's an important factor in a relationship, and it needs to be prioritized. That's mine. Brad?
Well, I think you've articulated that very well, much better than I feel like I'm going to articulate it. But do you know, I just think at every point of this, I've just been like, oh, that's such a good point. That's such a good point. And I'm like, geez, I've got to try and come up with some takeaways. My actual takeaway, I think, is like, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Now go back to the start and listen to it again, because there's so much in there. Like, you know, I genuinely, like, I mean, I think you've just given so much absolute gold, Claire. It's been really good. But, you know, I think my other takeaway, no soft play first dates. Important one. No, my serious one. Well, my first one was serious. Listen to this again because it's great. It was about the communication, because everything, and you talked so wonderfully about so many different things, but it all comes back to this idea of communication. And I guess do it early, because if one of those fears is that, oh God, the risk is I don't want to communicate because what happens if I put my foot in my mouth and I lose it all? Well, let's do that early, because you'll quickly either discover, actually, if it does all go horribly wrong, we haven't lost as much as 10 years down the line. But actually, so find out how you best communicate with one another, and find out how you create that safe environment for you to be able to speak and also them to be able to speak. That's my takeaways, I think.
Can I say one thing that we haven't said that's really important?
Of course.
Anyone who's dating that's listening to this, whether it's newly dating or they've been dating for a while, please just show up as yourself, because there's just absolutely no reason showing up or pretending you're something else, or that you don't feel a certain way when you actually feel a different way, because you're just going to be disappointing yourself or disappointing the other person. And you can only find an aligned person, someone who's actually for you, when you're being yourself. Like, if you're being yourself and that person doesn't fancy you, they're not for you. Brilliant. You've like cleared the way for the person who is. It's just so important. And so many people date. And I just had lots of experiences of men that have, and I know women do it all the time too, you know, pretend to be something slightly different from what they are. And it's just such a waste of time for everyone.
Yeah.
It's like, mate, like, why? Like, if you just said that at the start, so talking about mental health and being comfortable with having therapy, and if you have got any mental health struggles, just be honest at the start, because the right person will see it as attractive that you've been really open, attractive that you've been really honest, can be like, oh, that, you know, it can connect you both. And if that person acts like a dick about it, well, guess what? They weren't for you anyway. You don't want to be in a relationship with someone like that. So just don't feel you have to share your mental health battles if you are dating. Or even if just something has happened in the past that you're over now, but it was quite a big part of your life, you should still share it, because the right person will want to know your whole story, not just good bits. And I just think be as authentic as you can. I know that's hard. I know we're dating, it's vulnerable, you know, you want to show up as yourself, your best self. But you can be your best self and still be authentic. And that, like we were just chatting about, it all just comes down to just being really straight talking and not having a fear about, oh, well, that might put them off. See it as, well, that just gets me close to the right person. So good. See it as a positive, like reframe it.
Yeah.
That rather than having a fear around being truly yourself.
I think that links into that idea of fear of failure and not being afraid of failure, just welcoming failure, because actually you've discovered someone who was the wrong person. And that's a step in the right direction. You've eliminated one of the people on the planet. It wasn't them. And then you need to go through the next person, then the next person, then the next person. But you're absolutely right. You need to be authentically yourself in order to work out who does work with me and who doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway.
Yeah. Is that your takeaway from the episode, Claire? Or do you want...
Well, my takeaway was that my main takeaway was that bad relationships make a really bad for your mental health.
Yes.
And let's just remember that.
So stay single forever?
Not stay single forever. Stay single if you've got work to do with yourself. Don't look for a saviour to make yourself feel better, because it's just a quick fix and you'll be back to square one in a year's time. So stay single if you know that you're not. Another really good tip, just because I'm throwing them all in tonight. If you're on the fence about whether you should be dating and whether you're ready, ask yourself, would you date? Like, if I was to say to you, Matt, would you date yourself?
So I have done. I used to really happily enjoy days where I would take myself to the coffee shop, and then I'd take myself for a walk through the park, and then I'd take myself to the pictures all on my own and finish it thinking that was a banging day. And actually, it's that kind of process that has led me to think, like, what is it that I actually like to do that could be done with another person? So I ride mountain bike badly, but I do it. I absolutely don't want a hobby buddy. I don't want someone who would come bike riding with me. I want that to be my own time. But what other stuff do I do that I would enjoy sharing with another person? That's the stuff that I enjoy doing. So I need to find a person that I can do that with.
Yeah. But even if we pull it back to just you as a person, so what you offer to somebody, are you where you want to be in your career? Have you got the space to give to somebody when your kids are young? Mental health wise, you're in a good space to be a partner to somebody. Because I got given that question about 5 years ago, and way before my coaching business. And I was like, no, I wouldn't date. Because I was great, but I wasn't in a fulfilling career. I wasn't very ambitious. I was really playing it quite safe. I really wasn't where I wanted to be. And so if I'd met someone that was at that same space, I probably would have been like, So I went away and became the person that I want to meet. So if I could meet a male version of me, that would be great. But as in, I just leveled up in the areas that I wasn't doing well in. I really leveled up. I trained in something new. I launched a business. I made my focus entirely that. I focused entirely on my daughter. I made my life full of adventure and joy and fun without a boyfriend or a partner. So therefore, I was this sparkly thing that somebody would go, God, she seems great. Whereas, and I wasn't being talking about authenticity. I think I was showing up as that, but I wasn't truly it yet. So I went and became it. And then I thought, right, okay, maybe I'll date now. So it's a good place to work out whether you're ready, I think. But yeah, the main takeaway is going back to bad relationships and also putting yourself through lots of bad dating scenarios again and again are really bad for your mental health. So take stock. And if it's to do with dating, break the pattern, stop dating the same type of person, work out where you're going wrong, stop repeating it because it's really affecting your mental health. And if it's a partner, it's making you mentally unwell, have the conversation.
Yeah.
Be brave, have courage, that would be my takeaway.
Claire, as we've discussed on air, but also privately, the whole intention of this podcast is to help people, men, with their mental health. We think there's a really strong link between dating and the quality of a man's mental health, having all experienced dating fairly recently. So we're really thankful that you came on, because we think the conversation that we've just had and that people have just listened to has got a really good chance of helping some people. So on their behalf, but also from Brad and I, thank you ever so much for coming on, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, I've had so much fun. I've really enjoyed it. This is the first time I've been a guest. I'm always the interviewer rather than the interviewee. So it's been really lovely to be on the other side. And yeah, I've loved it. I think it's been a really good conversation. And I've learned stuff from you too. And it's so good to get a male perspective on this stuff because I only ever hear it amongst other women normally.
I feel like this is us opening the box of like, listen, men, this is what women think. And you going, listen, women, this is what men think. Like, I think that's super useful as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I smell a sequel.
Yeah, I feel up for it.
Thanks for coming on.
Worries.
It's been amazing.
Thank you. See you soon.
Cool.
Take care,
See you
Claire.
later. Bye.
Bye.
Bradders, what an episode that was. I know it was a long one, but there was so much in there. What a good guest Claire was.
Literally, there was so much and so much great advice. So interesting to hear it from a female perspective. She spoke really, really sensibly. A lot of the stuff she said really resonated with me, and I know our listeners are going to find this episode really useful as well.
Yeah, massive thanks to Claire, and massive thanks to everyone for listening.